All right, today we're going to be talking about building the ideal athlete. What does this mean? I'm going to be talking about at a very young age, maybe 5, 6 years old, which is the typical young age that kids start getting involved in sports. I'm going to be talking about developing, first and foremost, a strong mindset with fundamentals. I'm going to be talking about eventually, as they get older, developing an effective nutrition. And then lastly, I'm going to be talking about not just the obvious, which is developing a strong technical skill set in the sport, but I'm going to be talking about weight training, which is going to help develop and progress that baseline strength to help them be successful on the field or the court. All right, so let's get right into it. So first off, kids these days, the competitiveness that there is out in any sport that these kids are playing is just at a very high level. Parents are investing a lot of time, a lot of money, other resources to really help get their kids into a level that they feel is going to help them get to the highest level, because a lot of parents see potential in their kids. They have aspirations for them to help them eventually maybe not just get a college scholarship, but eventually play in the pros. But there are a lot of underlying factors that parents need to pay attention to as their son or daughter starts to develop and eventually develop more of that technical expertise in the sport that they're in. So first off is the topic of specialization. So a lot of parents these days focus on specializing in the sport that their son or daughter is taking off on, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, whatever it is. If they start at a young age, right? And as soon as they see their son or daughter like pick up the sport and really start excelling in it and maybe start separating themselves from other kids, they get excited. So they're like, oh, I'm going to spend all this extra time on additional coaches, additional resources to really like specialize in this sport. Like we're going to go with one sport to really kind of maximize the development of my son or daughter. And there are a lot of different takes about this topic. And that's not my intention. My intention is really to help bring some more awareness and really help you all to really help position your son or daughter to really excel. And the specialization piece, from people I've spoken to in different sports, coaches, professionals, even research I've done and my personal experience as well, is that especially at a young age, you want to have your son or daughter playing as many sports as possible. And the reason for that is because you really want to develop that good, solid foundation of diversity, right? You want to create that balance for them, and you really want them exposed to the different sport, because it's really going to help develop that skill set that whenever they do choose to pursue a sport, if that's the route that you go, they're going to be able to pick up bits and pieces of the other sports, different skill sets they attain and experiences that they learn from to really apply them as they get older. Obviously, there has to be a point where you have to kind of cut it off and say, okay, well, my son or daughter is at this age, and we really have to focus and narrow down on a sport. We can't just have my son or daughter playing all kinds of different sports, etc. Well, I personally believe you want them to play as many as possible for as long as possible. And it's going to be your decision, obviously, to decide when that is, if you go this route. But using age as a number is a good starting point, but not all kids develop the same, right? An 11-year-old doesn't physically or mentally develop the same as another 11-year-old. Maybe one needs to mature a little bit more. Maybe one needs to not just mature from a mental perspective, but even like from a physical perspective. Some have later growth spurts, things like that, right? So you also have to factor not just the age, but the other piece of it as well. And then again, just really, my advice is to diversify and really expose your son or daughter to as many sports as possible to create a really well-rounded athlete at a young age, because I feel that you will get a lot more benefit in the long game as your son or daughter gets older. The second piece, and actually this piece is going to dig into 3 specific underlying pieces that I feel are missed these days, and it's pretty much all across the board, is the concept of nutrition as a child, as a young athlete, the concept of developing a strong mindset, and then lastly, the concept of incorporating weight training or weight resistance into their development at a young age. So let's dig into one at a time. All right, the concept of nutrition. So for young athletes and parents, my advice here would be to develop a very high level understanding of just calories, right? Making sure that your son or daughter is eating enough. There are so many young athletes out there I see everywhere that are undersized for whatever sport they're playing. They're not eating, first off, and then you want to take it a little further and make sure they're eating quality type foods as well. But we can talk about that later. I think just making sure your son or daughter is eating enough to make sure that they not only keep the right levels of energy, the right recovery, and the right development, right? Nutrition is 85% of it all. So really starting putting some more emphasis, some more value behind nutrition for your young athlete or son or daughter. The second one is going to be mindset. And mindset here is, again, we got to take baby steps here, right? So as a young athlete, you just want to start helping your son or daughter, young athlete, to really start developing a sense of ownership, a sense of accountability, a sense of discipline, being able to execute whatever they're being taught, following through, being consistent. Now, obviously working hard, but that's the obvious. Showing up, being mentally present, listening, respectful of others, being coachable, all these fundamental things that are so important that they can then expand on as they get older, and you can get a little bit more detailed and expand on each of them. But again, just a really solid baseline, general foundation to really start developing a good mental foundation, a mental strong, that's going to eventually lead to a strong mindset, which will then come in play when they're in competition, right? So all this, again, is tied together. And then the last one is weight training. So there are a lot of parents, including myself, before I became educated on was that there's always been a thought or a fear as a parent that if I have my son or daughter start weight resistance or weight training at a young age, it's going to stunt their growth and their physical development and all that. Well, there's been tons of studies I've heard and spoken to a few professionals about this topic, and that is not true. Now, we have to be smart about incorporating weight resistance. I'm not promoting for you to go have your son or daughter start bench pressing all this crazy weight. Obviously, you don't want them to hurt themselves, but then that would definitely not get them good progress. But be smart about it, become educated, talk to different coaches. I'd be happy to speak to any of you all if you need tips or ideas or any guidance around this topic. But really start developing some weight resistance, and it can be body weight exercises to start. And then you can eventually layer on a little bit of weight, doing more dynamic type exercises, a little bit more flexibility, balance, just to kind of start developing a little good, strong foundation. And then you can put more emphasis on compound movements and things like that. But all this is really going to help their physical development. And it's really, look, at the end of the day, I've seen it, especially in high school kids, athletes, is when you feel like you're strong and you feel like you can stand up to somebody, that fear, you're going to suddenly, like, it kind of like allows you to kind of play free. And that psychological piece is so important for kids. And they got to feel comfortable with their bodies. They got to feel that they can sustain any physical activity, especially in the sport, and that they can stand up to anybody and compete with anybody. Really give them that confidence, that edge when they play in competition, especially as it gets more fierce at a later in their sport that they are competing in. All right, so let's flip it here. I'm gonna put a scenario together, right? A 12-year-old, let's say a 12-year-old in any sport, it has a very strong technical skill set. They're on the verge of getting into high school. And nowadays, scouts identify these elite athletes that have potential playing in college or even beyond at a very young age. I'm seeing athletes get scholarships at 12, 13, 14 years old for college. It's incredible, right? So a 12-year-old that is elite, technically strong, one of the best on their team or in their area, region, section, city, state, even potentially the country, right? These athletes are being identified so young now, right? And this athlete has no concept of nutrition, no concept of having a strong mindset, and no concept of having any physical strength training, weight training, right? So now they're leaning 100% on their technical skill set, which has gotten them to this place and will potentially even get them to the next level. The key is, though, not getting there. It's being able to stay there, right? You want to stay there. And in order to stay there is where these three factors I've been talking about come in. Strong mindset, nutrition, and strength training at a young age. Because these are going to be the three key differentiators that are going to not only help you get there, but are going to help you stay there, which is what you ultimately want, right? You don't want to just get to college and then be on the bench, right? You got a scholarship, great. Free education, great. But you have aspiration. If you get to college on a scholarship, you have aspirations to compete in college and maybe even potentially compete at the next level. But at the very minimum, you want to compete in college. Now, when you get to college, all these players are going to have scholarships, right? So you're now going to be, for the first time in your life, you're going to be surrounded by nothing but elite athletes. So how do you separate yourself from that? How do you differentiate yourself from that? Well, it's these three things that are going to help you differentiate yourself. And this is the value that I want to help teach these parents to focus on and put emphasis on at a young age, because as your son or daughter gets older and they get to this age and they get to that position, that's going to come in and it's going to help differentiate themselves to eventually compete and really separate themselves at that level, right? Strong mindset, right? You don't want a player or an athlete to get to college that is a knucklehead, right? You don't want someone that's not coachable, right? It's going to turn the coaches off. And eventually you may even get them to drop school, right? I've seen it a lot, time and time again. An athlete doesn't have any respect for anyone, for authority, nothing. They have no accountability, no ownership, no discipline, right? That's going to completely hinder any potential opportunity they have. What about an athlete that's undersized, right? You have, for example, like let's take a football player. You have a running back that is extremely gifted, super fast, runs a 4.40, right? And he's 5'10", 5'11", but he's only like 175. Now you have an athlete that is in competition on the team with him who has the same stature, but he's 205. Who do you think is going to get playing time? Now, I'm not saying that the 175 pounder won't, but the 205 pounder that's stronger, that's bigger, is probably going to be or have the edge on this person. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. These are the differentiators, right? And then the last one is going to be tied back into weight training, right? Which ties into nutrition, weight training are very closely aligned, which is, again, developing that strong base, and which eventually, I haven't even really touched on it, but it prevents injury down the line, right? You see a lot of torn ACLs, a lot of athletes with foot problems, a lot of athletes with like all types of physical problems. Well, it's because they never developed that strong base to their body. And when you get to a higher and higher level, you're taking beatings that whatever sport you're in, and it's just different. And you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare your body to not only sustain it, but to differentiate yourself, right? So putting some value behind these things is really what I'm trying to drive to all of you and bring some awareness, which is exactly what I feel is missing out there in the youth arena across all sports these days. All right, thank you all for watching. That's all I got for today. I appreciate your time hanging in there with me on the channel. I'm going to be posting additional videos digging into each of the three topics around stronger mindset, nutrition, weight training for youth athletes in general. So more to come on that. Keep a lookout for them. Subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them on the comment box below, or you can go to hyttraining.com. There is a book now button at the top right of the website. You can fill out your information and submit any questions, any comments, anything that you have, and we will be reaching back out to you, and we'd be happy to set up a consult with you all if you'd like to dig into or explore any of these topics a little further. Happy to help each and every one of you. Stay tuned for more. Again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.